Welcome. It is 5 past the hour, so we're going to officially start our conservation conversation tonight. I am Casey Tarian, TLC's Associate Director of Philanthropy, and tonight's Conservation Conversations host. Please take a moment as you're logging in to just let us know where you're logging in from and something positive that happened recently. In these strange times, we hope that you are taking care of yourselves. TLC staff, board, and partner organizations have enjoyed connecting with you through these regular conservation conversations. It has been really fun to share information about the work TLC and our partners are doing to make the Triangle healthier and more vibrant. You will have an opportunity to ask the panelists questions toward the end of the program. We hope to answer most of your questions, but if we run out of time, we'll answer them offline. Please just take a moment to locate the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. All questions should be submitted through this feature. Like many of you, TLC staff and speakers are logging in remotely, so bear with us as the internet might be slower than normal. You may also hear an occasional dog bark or cats meow, children, partners, or waves crashing because some of us, Sandy, are on the beach. And you might hear some thunder in the background too because it's raining and storming in certain parts of the Triangle. Tonight, I'm joined by TLC's Executive Director, Sandy Sweitzer, who will be speaking with board members Will Morgan, Toni Wyche Jones, Jack Blackmer, and Marlena Byrne about what inspires their passion for conservation and why they choose to support TLC. Welcome, everyone. Sandy, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Casey. So as I think all of you probably know, Triangle Land Conservancy was founded in 1983 by a group of dedicated citizens who were concerned about balancing growth and conservation of open space in the Triangle region. Together with thousands of members, like many of you, we've protected over 20,000 acres of land and 141 miles of stream across Wake, Orange, Durham, Johnson, Lee, and Chatham counties. TLC strives to create a healthier and more vibrant Triangle region by safeguarding clean water, protecting natural habitats, supporting local farms and food, and connecting people with nature through land protection and stewardship, catalyzing community action and collaboration. Our work is possible because of the support of members like many of you and our sponsors. So I am really excited to have these 4 awesome board members with us today. And we are going to do our best at having a conversation and ask each other some questions. And then at the end, we'll have, as Casey said, plenty of time for questions from you. So if we don't get to something you want, let us know. So I am going to start by asking Will. Will Morgan is TLC's board chair. He's a partner at Manning, Fulton and Skinner, where he's co-chair of the firm's government relations practice group. He's represented clients at the federal, state, and local level, but is now focused on representing clients in the North Carolina General Assembly. His clients include national trade associations, Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, and nonprofits, including Land for Tomorrow, a statewide coalition of the state's leading conservation groups, including TLC. Previously, Will served as the Director of Government Relations for the Nature Conservancy's North Carolina chapter. He earned a BA at UNC Chapel Hill and his JD from Wake Forest. He and his wife, Janie, live in Raleigh with their adorable son and daughter and their yellow lab. So I'm going to start the questions with you, Will. Tell us how long you've been on TLC's board and how TLC's work links or connects to your professional work.
Sure. Thanks, Sandy, and glad to be with everybody tonight. So I've been on the TLC board for 2 years now. And as Sandy said, my professional background is that I'm an attorney and a lobbyist. I've spent the last 10 years lobbying mostly at the North Carolina General Assembly. And for the most part, I've lobbied for conservation groups. So for 4 years, I was the Director of Government Relations for the North Carolina chapter of the Nature Conservancy. And in that role, I lobbied for TNC, both at the state and federal level, for policies and funding that helped enable TNC's work in North Carolina. And in my current job at a law firm, I represent a number of clients, including, as Sandy mentioned, the Land for Tomorrow Coalition, which TLC is a member of. And the Land for Tomorrow Coalition is a group of conservation groups from across the state that all share the goal of increasing funding and other policies that help enable the work that the land trusts do across the state. So I'm excited to be on TLC's board and hope that my knowledge of state government and relationships that I have can help TLC achieve their mission. Sandy, do you want me to kick it back to you or kick it to Toni? I didn't know if you wanted to do an intro.
Yeah, I'll do an intro of each person as we go around. Thanks, Will. Yeah, we're counting on you to be our inside view if you ever get to go inside the building again. Our next panelist, I was going to say contestant. Our next panelist is Toni Wyche Jones, who is TLC's board secretary. I'm not sure if I said, but Will just became on July 1st TLC's board chair, and Toni became board secretary. She is an environmental engineer and entrepreneur who grew up in rural Eastern North Carolina, where she developed a love of the outdoors and a desire to protect it. Toni served as an environmental engineer with the Environmental Protection Agency for 10 years, and before that, she was an environmental engineer with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. Toni holds a master's degree in biological and agricultural engineering from NC State and a BS in agricultural and biosystems engineering from NC-A&T. She lives in Wendell with her husband, Toni, and 2 adorable boys. Toni, how does TLC's work connect with your professional and personal work?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for that intro, Sandy. And again, thank you everyone for being here. I'm really, really excited and honored for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. But TLC draws that bridge for me in both of my paths for my career, so to speak. So as you mentioned, my role as an environmental engineer with both the EPA and DEQ, where I worked largely with stream restoration and wetland mitigation, also doing some regulatory work for air pollution control technologies with the EPA. And now on the entrepreneurial side of things, running a fitness studio where the goal is health and wellness and also connecting people to natural resources and realizing that there is that bridge in connecting people with the land and the resources to take care of it, but to also enjoy it while it's here. So it's been absolutely amazing. You would kind of think the two don't really go hand in hand, owning a gym and working as an engineer, but the two have matched almost seamlessly together, and it's really been great to just kind of serve as the bridge between the two. And TLC just helps to really bring that all in and together. So I'm really enjoying my time. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I've served on the board now for 3 years, amazingly.
Great, thanks, Toni. So next we're going to go to Jack Blackmer, who is chair of TLC's Conservation Strategies Committee and retired as Senior Manager, Quality, Environment, Health, and Safety at Novozymes. Jack has had a lifelong interest in nature and the environment, exploring woodlands, streams, and ponds while growing up in Michigan. In Jack's last position before retirement at Novozymes, his responsibilities included environmental compliance assurance and conducting EHS due diligence for mergers and acquisitions in the US and Canada. Jack holds a BS in chemistry and chemical engineering from Michigan State University and lives with his wife Donna in Cary. So Jack, how long have you been on TLC's board, and how does our work link with your professional and personal work?
Yeah, well, again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. And I've been on the board for a couple of years, but I've actually been a member of TLC for over 22 years. Very busy in my career, so I wasn't real active in the organization until I retired 5 years ago. But then I became quite active and really enjoying it. But I had a really long career in the biotech industry, beginning first with a pharmaceutical firm in Michigan that's now a part of Pfizer. And then, as Sandy mentioned, later down here with Novozymes in Franklin County, an enzyme manufacturing company. And my job there, Sandy talked a little bit about that. The mergers and acquisitions work that I did doing environmental due diligence is a good tie-in with TLC, particularly conservation strategies, and making sure that we don't acquire or do a conservation easement on land that can be a concern. So we have some of those discussions on the Conservation Strategies Committee. But another part of my job was environmental management systems. And that was actually, I found, the most self-rewarding part of my job, because I was helping to build environmental management systems and maintain them to assure regulatory compliance, but also to continually improve and reduce the environmental footprint of the organization. So some great progress was made, and that certainly felt good to see that happening with the team approach. So it's a really good link then with TLC to continue my third career.
Yeah, Jack doesn't mention it, but he's one of our steadiest volunteers. When life was normal, he was kind of our very own speakers bureau. So appreciate that. Last but not least is Marlena Byrne, who is TLC's board vice chair as of the 1st, and also chair of the HR and Governance Committee. Marlena works for the state of North Carolina on long-term disaster planning and climate change policy with the Office of Recovery and Resilience. She's an environmental and land use lawyer. And prior to moving to North Carolina 3 years ago, Marlena was deputy city attorney for the city and county of San Francisco for over 15 years. She now lives in Durham with her husband, Brian, 3 stepsons, and her black lab, who is cute also.
Thank you for that.
So Marlena, you know the question. How does your board service connect with your job and your passions?
Yeah, thank you for that intro, Sandy. I should clarify, my dog is very much a mutt. She's only like a quarter lab, so she's a total Carolina mutt dog. And thank you for everyone who's joined us today. It's really great to be able to do this and talk about the work of TLC. So it connects pretty directly to my professional life. I became an attorney about 25 years ago and did that in order to be a land use lawyer. I knew I wanted to practice land use law when I applied to law school. And that's been one of my passions, the way we use the land, the way we treat this beautiful planet that we have, has been my entire professional career. And since coming to North Carolina 2 years ago, I've switched from looking at that from the strictly legal perspective to working on climate change and long-term disaster recovery, including most specifically recovery from hurricanes Matthew, Florence, and now Dorian. I was lucky to grow up in California in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, so started doing hikes with my family when I was too small to even walk, just in the my dad's like little shoulder backpack. And I have a love of hiking and backpacking and kayaking and just being outdoors in general, anywhere on the land. So that also really connects me to TLC's work. I love going outside and being at the preserves and being able to go on hikes with my husband and my dog and drag my stepsons along, although they're getting more interested in that as they get older. So yeah, I think there's a very direct link between the work I'm now doing with climate change also and the work of Triangle Land Conservancy and really all the land conservancies across our state and in the US that are trying to preserve our open spaces and agricultural lands. It's really important for climate change that we do that.
Thanks. Yeah, I think about that, particularly after we protected Brogden bottomlands, the 1,100 acres in Johnson County. About half of it, a little over half of it, is wetlands that, are really important for all this flooding that we're having, to have a place to absorb all of that water coming down the river. So great. Well, thank you all. And I want to thank you all again for coming and being on here tonight, and also for your work on the board. I know you all are super busy lives, so I appreciate that a lot. So the next question, let's see, and I'll start with Toni this time, and then you can toss it to whoever you want. The next question is, tell us why you donate your time and your talent to TLC. What is it about TLC's work that inspires you the most?
Right. So I'll have to start off by saying I likely serve on the board for selfish reasons. It actually connects me more with what's going on in the community and the work that TLC is doing. I also get first dibs on what preserves are up and coming. So that's always interesting. But I really hope to be a valuable contributor in, again, serving as a bit of a bridge between people in my community and family who may just not know that TLC exists or what it does, or how they can play a role in helping TLC to push that mission of preserving and protecting pristine lands throughout the state, or even just creating that space where people can come and enjoy nature. So I think that's the biggest part of it for me, just serving as that connection. I love having conversations with people who, you know, may see me as just a gym owner and then don't realize that I have that connection, and it just sparks some really great conversations. And I've even had a couple of people say, oh yeah, I went out and checked out that preserve, or I hung out there with my kiddos. So that's always just a really rewarding aspect of serving on the board. All right, so you know what? I'm gonna take that over to Marlena and ask you the same question, if you could answer there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really ties back to my, you know, what I've dedicated my professional life to is about, you know, preserving land, you know, helping our water quality stay good or get better, keeping spaces open for people to be able to, you know, hike in and engage in other recreation activities in. It's really, you know, the work the Triangle Land Conservancy is doing is really important, both in the public facing work of, you know, the preserves that we have where people can actually, especially in this time, get outside, get some fresh air, get some exercise, but also the work that we do with preserving land where we're buying easements on property and enabling it to stay in agricultural production instead of being turned into a bunch of homes, or keeping spaces open. I think that for me, that is just incredibly important work. So it makes sense for me to donate my time here. I also, frankly, you know, I've said this a lot, I like backing a winner, and TLC is doing really good work. It's nice to work with an organization that has a really strong, competent staff, that has donors that are excited and involved, and that really is doing great work already and trying to help that organization figure out what the next steps are. I think that for me is very exciting because we're coming from a position of strength, and it's really easy to get complacent when you're in a position of strength and not be that daring. And so I find it very exciting because I think TLC is doing a good job. You know, we're trying to do a good job on the board. The leadership of TLC, Sandy and her great staff, of actually really thinking, what are the next steps we can take? What can we do next? How do we not just keep doing the same thing over and over? How do we push it to the next level? And that's exciting to me, both in terms of like the number of acres we're going to preserve, but also in the types of educational programs we're offering, the different communities we're trying to reach. I think that's where it becomes also really exciting to work with TLC for me. So I'd be curious to know what Jack's response to this question is, because he's also, of I think the four of us, the one who's served on the board for the longest. So
Hey,
Jack,
Marlena, this is Toni. Before you even go over to Jack, I'm going to just go out here and say that your answer is totally my answer. And I also think it's safe to say that anything that Jack and Will say at this point, I'm just gonna tack that on to my answer to the question too. There you go.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say real quick, this picture that's pulled up right now is from our board retreat on March 7th, the last time we saw each other in person, at Williamson Preserve. That'll be opening later. So go ahead, Jack.
Okay. Well, Toni, that's fine that you want to tack that on, because plagiarism is the greatest form of flattery. So, okay, so what I'm excited about a lot about TLC, but what excites me really the most is my work with the Conservation Strategies Committee. And our committee evaluates all proposed conservation projects, whether they're land acquisitions or whether they're conservation easements, and makes recommendations to the board on approval. And to do that, we look at a lot of aspects, but the most important things we look at are the 4 benefits of conservation. So we're looking to make sure that it's safeguarding clean water, it's protecting natural habitats, it's supporting local farms and food, and connecting people with nature. We want to be sure the projects have good environmental benefit and meet at least 1, preferably 2 or 3 or even 4 of the conservation benefits. So even narrowing down further, projects that also conserve land that are significant natural heritage sites is even more exciting. That's a program that's administered by the Department of Environmental Quality in North Carolina, and actually other states as well, and inventories sites that have special environmental features, ecological features, a lot of biodiversity, rare and endangered species of plant and animal life, unique ecological features. So these are really sensitive sites and really important to conserve, because they won't last if land is developed. So our strategy going forward, and established in 2018, says that we will, with our partners, conserve 75% of the remaining natural heritage sites in our 6-county region. And I'm really excited to be a part of doing that.
I guess Will is next then.
Yes, and I will say ditto to everything that's been said so far. So when I think about what excites me most about TLC's work and inspires me to participate on the board, I think the short answer for me is the next generation. And I think there's 2 aspects of that for me. One is thinking about my kids and all the other children in the triangle and giving them a place where they can get outside and learn about the natural world around them. I know that for me, growing up, spending time outside in nature was very formative to me becoming the person I am. And I think that it's so important to have places where our children can get outside and learn about the flora and the fauna and the water around the triangle and develop that sense of place. And so I'm inspired by the work that TLC does to create those open spaces where my kids and lots of other kids around the triangle can get outside and learn about the region that we all live in. And the other aspect of it for me, thinking about the next generation, isn't just our kids, but their kids and their kids' kids, and thinking about, I'm just always so excited when I read one of TLC's conservation easements, or when we purchase a piece of property and I read that deed where it says that the land will be protected in perpetuity. And I just think that's so cool, that legal phrase, in perpetuity, to know that the work that we're doing protecting these lands isn't just for the next 10 or 20 years, that this work will live on long beyond us, and that generations of people after us will be able to enjoy the hard work that the TLC staff does. And so that always inspires me to think about.
Thanks. We lost you there for a second, Will. Oh, this is a great picture of staff. I just told them that they had to include it in every one of these conservation conversations in some way or another, because we have such an awesome staff. We've had some turnover. We have a couple of AmeriCorps members who aren't with us anymore, and a couple staff who went on to other really awesome jobs. But anyway, we do have a great staff. I want to move on to another question now. I want to ask each of you sort of address the issue of diversity, equity, inclusion. a lot has happened in the last couple of months, and TLC made a public statement about our racial equity work, standing up for racial justice. But some people have asked why a land trust would do that work. And I wanted to have each of you speak a little bit to the question of what you think TLC has done well working on diversity, equity, inclusion, and what do you think we should prioritize next? I will say for folks who don't know, TLC has actually been doing a lot of work on diversity, equity, inclusion probably for the last 5 years or so, since I became executive director, and even before that. And so at this time, it's good for us to reflect on what we have done, but then also we know we have a lot more to do. So who would like to dive in on that question? What do you think TLC has done well, and what do you think we should do next or more of?
I can take it first.
Thanks.
One is that we have a stated goal in our strategy that says we will strive for racial diversity on our board and staff. And it's not just a general goal, it's a specific goal in terms of percentages and numbers, and we've made really good progress. So I think any goal needs to be measurable, and we're able to measure that, and we have had success already. We're not finished, but we have, by 2025, we want to achieve that goal. What we need to focus on going forward, one thing I think is, was an eye-opener to me at a board retreat we had back in March. And at that retreat, I learned that Black family farmland ownership increased in the late 1800s and early 1900s, but since that time has substantially decreased. And so why is that happening? Well, one of the reasons it's happening now is because of increasing land values, which sounds like a good thing. But as those land values increase, so do the tax values. And it gets to the point where the families can no longer pay the taxes and have to sell the farmland in order to do that. And so that's a serious concern, but how can TLC help with that? Well, we can help with that through conservation easements. Because by putting a conservation easement on the land value is actually less because it's no longer of interest to a developer. But the family can continue to farm that land. Conservation easements allow for some continued activities as long as the environment is protected and all the legal requirements are met. So by doing that, they can continue to farm that land and live on that land and not have to sell it. So that's something we can try to focus on more going forward, especially in the Triangle area. Okay, who would like to take it next?
Hey Jack, this is Toni. I'll take it next. I think there's a good segue from what you just closed on. Actually, I'll start with where there are areas for improvement in DEI within TLC, and to piggyback on that, I'm glad that we are starting to focus on connecting minority and Black landowners with the resources that TLC has and can provide. And I also am hopeful that there will be more of an educational component to that, not just in that connection, but that engagement with those minority landowners so that they understand the process and that there's not this taboo or fear around how the Conservancy works and what those easements mean, and how the land is able to remain in the family, and just those processes that come along with it. So there's definitely room to expand further in that engagement with the minority landowners. But I think TLC has done an amazing job in tackling DEI and racial equity issues head on. Even before the climate in the nation took this turn recently, TLC was already plugging in and engaging in that work and paying attention to diversity issues and looking at our staff and looking at the board and recognizing that diversity doesn't just mean, you know, go grabbing a couple of brown people and bringing them to the board, but looking for those who had qualifications that would bring diverse ideas and thoughts and really help to move the organization forward. I think the agency has done an amazing job with that, and I was really, really just impressed with how TLC did not shy away from tackling DEI head on. I don't know that I should kick it off to anyone if there's anyone who just wants to take it from there.
I'll jump in. I'm smiling because Marlena and I compared notes on our answer to this question yesterday, and we had similar answers. So I'll do my best not to take.
You're going to steal my answers now.
Well, I'll echo what Jack and Toni have already said in terms of what TLC has done well. I think that Sandy and the staff and the board who have come before us have done a really great job in terms of the makeup of the staff and the board and making sure that there's representations from all different communities, geographically, racially, and otherwise. And so I commend the work that Sandy and the board members who came before us did to diversify the staff and the board. And in terms of what I think TLC can do better, I think Jack referenced the board retreat we had back in March 7th, and we had a presentation at that board meeting about the history of land ownership in America and the role that land ownership has played in systemic racism. And I think it was really eye-opening for me. I had never really thought about that through that lens before, kind of the intersection of race and land ownership in America. And, you know, that board retreat was in early March. So obviously before race was kind of brought to the forefront of our national conversation, given recent events. But I think that one thing that it made me realize in terms of what TLC can continue to do is help tell the story of the land that we've protected and what the history of that land is. You know, I think when I think about, you know, characteristics of different tracts of land that TLC protects, I think about protecting water quality or natural heritage, but I've never really thought about kind of the history of the land in terms of who lived there and who worked there. And, you know, TLC owns land now that slaves worked hundreds of years ago. And I think telling that story, as we have visitors out of the preserves, telling the story of that land is incredibly important to educate people like me who may not think about that when they go out to a TLC preserve. So I think we all have a lot of work to do in this area. And I think that's one thing that TLC can continue to do. Marlena, I hope I didn't take all of your material.
Oh, I'm a lawyer. I'm sure I'll find something to talk about. No, I would just like to echo everything that everyone said. I think that our strongest move so far has been the diversity that we have both on the board and in the staff. I think that representation matters, and I don't think that's a small thing. That TLC has done a really good job so far of having, you know, we have, you know, I'm Latina. We have a lot of board and staff members who are African American. We have someone coming on the board who is part of the South Asian community here in the Triangle, which is a really large part of our community. We also have LGBTQ members on the board. And I think that we've done a really good job of having that representation, which is very important, but is also kind of like the first step for when you're starting to think about these things. It's just like making sure that there's a diverse community of people talking about these issues, but then that diverse community has to figure out like what you're actually going to do about it. And I think that those next steps are very much that reaching out to landowners who represent all the diversity in the Triangle and really trying to support people who need that support with being able to retain the land in their families and for their communities through having conservation easements on the property, getting the tax breaks that involves, and reducing the pressure for development. And I also completely agree with Will that telling the story of the land is really important. You know, the land that TLC now has stewardship over, has had many different stewards, including African Americans and Africans who were brought here during the Great Diaspora. And before that, indigenous people who lived on these lands, and being able to link to all of those people who have worked these lands, who've burned them in controlled burns, who've, you know, farmed them, who've lived on them, is really important part of the story. And that makes it even more significant for why we're trying to preserve these places, because they do have a lot of historical value as part of the story of this country, not just, you know, in addition, I should say, to the value they have for habitat and water quality and all these other important things that we're trying to preserve. So I think we have our work cut out for us, but, you know, I have a lot of confidence in the group of people who are trying to do that work. So that's a good thing.
Thanks. I think that's a good summary. One of the things that I do want to say about sort of telling the story of the history of the land, we, before I came to TLC, Horton Grove Preserve was opened in 2012, and the trails are named after the descendants and enslaved people who lived on the property and worked on it over generations. And it's really cool if you pause when you're starting on the Justice Loop, you can read about the Justice family. And I think that's really great. At Williamson Preserve, that's going to be opening later this summer, we'll be telling the story of the family and the folks who sold it to TLC at a really discounted rate, and then generations back of people who lived and worked on the land. And I do think that's an important part of this story, as you said. I mean, one of the ways you connect people to nature is by reminding them that it wasn't always looking the way it was. So great. So one last question for everyone. And we're getting close to time, so I hope people are coming up with questions. So the question is, what is your favorite preserve and why? And we will go through this, Will, Toni, Jack, and Marlena. So, Will, what's your favorite preserve and why?
So I'm going to say the Williamson Preserve that hasn't even opened yet is my favorite because of all the potential it has. Sandy, if y'all can see the screen, is showing a picture of my son Charlie and I out there earlier. I guess that was in January or February. I've certainly spent more time at other TLC preserves, but like I said, I think just the potential that I see at the Williamson Preserve is enormous. I'm also selfishly excited that it will be the closest preserve to my house in Raleigh. It'll only take me about 15 minutes to get out there. And I'm selfishly excited for that, but I also think that it represents a great opportunity for TLC to engage people in Raleigh that, maybe haven't been to Horton Grove or White Pines or some of the other TLC preserves in the Triangle, to be another new, closer preserve. So I'm excited about that aspect of it. And I'm also excited about all the farming projects out there. I think Jack mentioned TLC's 4 conservation priorities, including supporting local farms and food. And I think the potential out there to connect young farmers and give them an opportunity to farm land out there is really exciting. And so I'm really excited to see what happens out there over the next few years, and look forward to everybody who's on this call being able to get out there soon. Toni, what's your favorite TLC preserve?
All right, well, I shy away from picking favorites because I tend to just jump and grab whatever is nearby and whatever serves the need at the time, right? So if I'm with my kiddos, or if, my husband and I just want to take a casual stroll, or, so whichever one serves the need. But if you guys are going to make me pick one, I'll go with Brumley. And so it has just an amazing mix of, this picture that's on the screen right now just says it all. My background as an environmental engineer is in water resources engineering. So anytime I can get anywhere near a body of water, it's just so much serenity and peace there. But Brumley also has a kids loop. And so we've recently started exposing our children to hiking. And we've done a bit of hiking in the mountains. And so it's always super easy on our preserves to get the kiddos out and put them in a place where they're really comfortable. And so we've enjoyed our time there when we're out near Chapel Hill or, you know, hanging out with friends and things like that. So, but I'd say Brumley, but I'm not going to pick a favorite. I love them all. All right, am I kicking it over? Let's see. Jack, how about you? What's your favorite?
Yeah, well, there's aspects of every preserve that's special to me, but my number one is White Pines for sure. It's 275 acres with over 6 miles of hiking trails and very unique topography that's more like hiking in the mountains than it is the Piedmont. And there's a vista of 2 beautiful rivers. You're seeing one of them here, the Rocky and the Deep River. And this is a view of the confluence, or where the rivers come together. 2 beautiful wide rivers, a very peaceful spot. In fact, it's a good spot to see some wading waterfowl, such as great blue herons, great green herons, and belted kingfishers, ones you don't see in many other locations. And it has a wide variety of flora, including the white pine trees, of course, and 4 other varieties of pines, and a lot of other coniferous and deciduous trees, and also some beautiful flowering trees and shrubs. You have a picture coming up here of a mountain laurel, yeah, right there. Beautiful mountain laurels on this property, and even Catawba rhododendrons grow in a small area along a bluff on the Rocky River. And there's also a great variety of spring ephemeral wildflowers on this reserve. So I think it's one of the most diverse and beautiful places in all of creation. And when I'm out at that preserve, I feel very close to God. It's a very special place. Okay, Marlena, it's yours.
All right. Well, I'm with Toni. It's really hard to pick my favorite preserve. They're all just beautiful. And I actually was at White Pines for the first time only a couple months ago. It's been really wonderful since I moved here 2.5 years ago to just explore all of these preserves. But one that we've been really enjoying lately is Horton Grove. Since we live in Durham, it's actually pretty close to us. I don't think I realized how close it was the first year or so that I lived here. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful piece of land. It's up on the northern part of Durham County, and it's directly adjacent to historic Staggsville State Park, which maybe some of you have been to. And it actually is part of the historic plantation of Staggsville. And it's really just this great combination of these open meadows and forest, and there's a couple different creeks that run through the property. There's great spots to picnic. There's a lot of the historic, which you're seeing right now, the historic agricultural buildings that were associated with the plantation. And it's just a really breathtaking piece of property. There's great like wildflowers and these just sort of open meadows that we're helping to maintain through controlled burns, which is, I think, just really fascinating. But also, as Sandy mentioned before, the land here has a very interesting history. I think my understanding is Staggsville was one of the largest plantations in North Carolina when it was an active plantation before the Civil War. And the history of the land is very much evident there, both in the buildings that remain, but also the naming of all the trails after different families that lived there, the enslaved families that lived there. So I really like it. It's a great place to go. I like walking our dog there. My middle stepson, I have 3 teenage stepsons, so it's always good when you can find an activity that they will all be willing to participate in. And my middle stepson, who's 16, has gotten really into hiking, and he's actually been going there to have like these socially distanced hikes with his friends. So that's been nice to know that he has a way to like connect with his friends and be outdoors during this time. So yeah, I love them all, but Horton Grove has been really fun to get to know better in the last 6 months or so.
Great. Well, thank you all very much again for being with us tonight and for serving on the board. I have really I will tell you that when I became the director of TLC, the thing I dreaded the most was working with a board. And I just feel so fortunate that we have such a great board. I feel like I can ask a question and get really good advice. And I mean, the expertise that just the four of you bring is just astonishing to me. And you just are a small part of the really talented board that we have. So I really appreciate you doing that. So that is the end of our part of it. We wanted to leave time for people to ask questions. You can go to the little Q&A button at the back in your question, and we'll do our best to answer them. So Casey, are there some questions for us?
Yes, so we've received a few of them. As Sandy said, just please make sure that you're submitting your questions through the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We have a question about where is the best place to find maps of the preserves with parking and trails marked?
On our website.
Yeah, I could take, yeah, on our website is the best place, and also at the preserves, and you can find kiosks that have maps as well. But in order to have them with you, it's best to go to the website and have a printed copy ahead of time. There's another way you can have maps with you. It's an app called Hiking Project. It's done by REI. It's actually a nationwide app, and you can search. Our preserves are in there. And so as long as you have a cell signal when you're on the preserve, you're able to access a map and see exactly where you are on a trail at any time.
Great. We have a question specifically for Will. Will, do you think TLC could gain any traction if it were to encourage government agencies that provide financial support for farm infrastructure, that it be prioritized for land that is subject to conservation easements that allow for farm use, and for conservation organizations that own land that has been placed in farm use?
I'm happy to try to answer the question. I'm not sure I totally understand it. So North Carolina does have there's 3 different conservation trust funds in North Carolina. There's the Clean Water Management Trust Fund, the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, and then the third one is a mouthful, the Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund. The first 2 are housed at the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and the third one is housed at the Department of Agriculture. And the Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund its primary purpose is helping to protect farmland across the state. Commissioner Steve Troxler is the Commissioner of Agriculture in North Carolina. I've heard him say multiple times that he believes the #1 problem facing the future of agriculture in North Carolina is the loss of farmland. And there is I think the current appropriation for that trust fund is around $6 million a year. They also got $13 million extra last year to help match some federal funds that came down through NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is a federal agency. So I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but there are some great programs in North Carolina that help protect farms. And I think one of the great things about it is that for the most part, the Farmland Preservation Trust Fund funds easements to permanently protect these family farms, but allow people to continue to work those farms. And so it's a great tool for family farmers who may be struggling to make ends meet and want to stay on their farm, but by selling a conservation easement, they're able to generate some additional income from selling that easement that also allows them to continue to farm the land. So that program has been really successful, and Commissioner Troxler has been a good ally of the conservation community and lobbying for additional funding for that trust fund.
And those easements, in addition to protecting farmland, they also have conservation components to them, like safeguarding the water or the natural habitat that is around the property and that kind of thing. So I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I think, I was just going to say, I think I took his question to be asking sort of what other incentives could we provide, could the state provide for people to put their land under conservation easement? So there's the obvious one, which is you get a tax break by putting your land in conservation easement. But I was taking it to say, if you already have done that, are there other incentives that then you could be eligible for if you've got a conservation easement on your property, as a way to like further incentivize people to do this in the first place? And I'm sure there are. I think one of the limitations we run into is what Will's talking about, is that there's a limitation on the funding we have to spend money on conservation easements. I don't think I mean, Sandy can speak to this more than I can. I don't think we have any shortage of people wanting to put conservation easements on their land. What we have a shortage of is is the money to pay them for those conservation easements. So I think that's probably the best way to incentivize it. We don't need to incentivize the landowners at this point, at least very broadly speaking. There's definitely certain communities we need to reach out to more and incentivize more, but we need more money for this.
Yeah, I would say in addition to more money for the Farmland Protection Trust Fund, which is one of the projects that Land for Tomorrow Coalition lobbies for with Will's help. I would say the other thing that I believe it was in 2014, the state conservation tax credit went away. So if people want to donate an easement, they only get the federal credit. And we actually have some landowners who are interested in donating easements, but are waiting for the state tax credit to come back. So, you know, it's been a while. We'll see if that happens. So thanks. Good question. More?
Yes, it might be helpful if I took myself off mute to ask you the questions. What current conservation projects are you excited about? And this might be for everyone, if you have an answer.
Well, I'm going to go first. I'm most excited about Williamson Preserve that is going to open soon. We had hoped to open it April 25th, and we're on this like super focused effort to get all the trails done and the signs in the parking lot, and then the pandemic hit, and that was, we really rely on our volunteers, so we weren't able to keep with the timeline, but slow but sure, that work is happening, and there are going to be, gosh, I think it's around 8 miles of trails when it first opens, and there'll be mostly multi-use trail. There's a really lovely 1 mile loop around 2 ponds on the north side, and then there'll be directional trails, loops for hiking and mountain biking to go different directions in hopes that people will not bash into each other. So I'm really excited about that. And it's every time, I have not been out there enough lately, but I keep getting some really beautiful pictures sent, so I'm excited. But I'm not a board member, sorry.
I can add to that. A couple of them. One is a recent acquisition in Johnson County that Sandy mentioned, the Brogden lands, and that's 1,100 acres. And so it'll be interesting to see what all can become of that, because even state parks had some interest in developing a portion of that. Actually, not developing it in terms of use, but for public access at some point in time. But another that really excites me is actually kind of a series of land acquisition projects we have been working on near Falls Lake. And one that we completed a year ago is especially exciting because it has a nice natural heritage area on it of Douglas bittercress, a rare and endangered wildflower. And we're working now on a much larger adjacent parcel that is primed for development. And we're partway through the funding, and there's a lot of work going on by TLC staff to make that happen. But if we can get that, it'll be a nice addition.
Great. So we've had a handful of questions come in, so hopefully we can get through them, but if not, we will answer them offline. We had another question come in. This is specifically for another board member. Toni, what would be an effective start for an educational component when discussing, engaging, and involving minority landowners?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the middle part of the question? You cut out on me just a little bit. So I heard what would be an effective start, and then it chimed out a little bit.
Oh, no. Okay. Sorry about that. What would be an effective start for an educational component when discussing, engaging, and involving minority landowners?
Oh, that's great. So there are a number of aspects that we can consider there. If you're speaking from a personal position, because I think we all have a role in engaging. One, it's, an awareness. TLC is going to need that assistance from the community in identifying some of these landowners where there could be a mutually beneficial relationship between the organization and the landowner. So there's that aspect of from a personal level. From the organization itself, I have to give that a little bit more thought because you put the word effective in there. I could rattle off some ideas just off the cuff, but that's a good question. Sandy, can we put a pin in that?
Well, yeah, I can answer a little bit of that. We regularly do keeping the farm workshops for
that's right. Yeah.
farmers in Wake and Johnson counties, and sometimes in Orange and Durham County. And I think that one of the things we've talked about is making a more intentional effort to reach out to minority landowners when we do that. The other thing is that we have done some work with RAFI, the Rural Advancement. We have a ton of partners. If you remember when I talked about the mission statement, I talked about in collaboration. A lot of groups that we work with, and so we could work with them to do specific. We don't know who the African American landowners are necessarily. It's not one of the things that's in the recorded documents, but RAFI and other groups that work with them do. And so we've talked about ways that we could do more outreach. I'm going to kind of segue into the next question too. When we do the Keeping the Farm workshops in Durham and Orange County, we do those in collaboration with other land trusts that work in the Upper Noose area, and that includes River Association. So they are a very close collaborating partner with us. They work specifically on the River and implementing the State Park Master Plan. And so they have a very specific area within TLC's region, but we work really closely. If somebody calls us and they are a landowner in the area, we refer them to and vice versa. We recently completed something called help me out here, the New Hope. It'd be the New Hope Upper Noose Corridor Program project. And so it was a study talking about how to make more connectivity between those two watersheds. That was one of the things we did. One of the organizations we work with was the River Association. Sorry, it's called the New Hope Collaborative. And anyway, so, we just, as executive directors, I talk a lot with Jessica, the new ED, used to talk a lot with Rebecca, Robin, and now with Ricky at the Ellerby Creek watershed. So we do have tons of collaboration in all of our work. But yeah, so I hope that answers the question somebody asked about our partnering with the River Association.
We are over on time. We have a few more questions, but I do want to ask this one fun question that I think anyone can respond. If TLC had a mascot, what do you think it should be?
The first thing that came to my mind was a dragonfly. I just think that's because we were talking about the picture of the dewy bug in the beginning of the slides here, but I don't know. Anybody else have any ideas?
Well, my thoughts are a beaver, because we have a beaver terrorizing us at Bromley right now. But the other one would be something really cute, like a little otter or something. So cool.
Sandy, you're just very popular. Your phone is blowing up.
Yeah, sorry about that. I want to thank you guys very much for joining us, and I want to thank all the attendees also. It was a lot of fun. If you have any more questions that you'd like to ask of me or other board members, you can find us on the website, and we'd love to hear from you. And thanks again to Toni and Jack, Marlena, and Will for joining us tonight, and for Casey for pulling this together.
Yeah, thank you,
Sandy.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And as we end tonight's presentation, a recording of this session will be available with some resources on our website tomorrow. We welcome you to learn more about how you can connect with nature by visiting our website, where you can find maps and details for our nature preserves, as well as signing up for the Hiking Challenge Triangle Explorer, and where you can watch previous conservation conversations. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night. Take care.
Good night.